2023. Appreciate everyone coming. We actually have a good crowd. We always have good crowds, but it's just more abundance. Appreciate everybody coming. Let's go ahead and start. We'll turn it over for the opening to Councilmember Catherine Buse to share that with us.
Yep. Just trying to turn on our microphones. I will start the meeting with a prayer. Our Heavenly Father, we thank Thee for this day that we've been given. We thank Thee for the abundance that we have in this valley. We thank Thee for the beautiful place to live. We're grateful for the residents and those that live here. Heavenly Father, we thank Thee for the blessings of this beautiful fall that we've received and the wonderful weather. We ask Thee to bless us that we can have guidance in this meeting, help us to be able to do the work of the residents here and have protection and guidance as we do that. Watch over and protect our loved ones and those that live here and bless them with peace and prosperity. This we pray in the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen.
And we're going to go ahead and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, thank you very much. We'll go ahead and we'll start with the review and approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second? Moved and seconded that we approve the agenda as been published. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. How about the minutes of October 10th, 2020? We'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded to approve the minutes of October 10th, 2023. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Before we go to the report of the county executive, let's go ahead and welcome back Councilmember Mark Hurd. Good to see you.
Good to be seen. Better than
Amongst the
viewed.
living.
Yes, thank you.
Good to see you. It is good to have you back.
Appreciate it.
We have heard, we felt like you were still alive because we'd hear from you from a box, but it is good to have you.
Out of the cage.
I'm glad you're healing.
Thank you.
I'll turn it over to the executive's report.
Mr. Chair, we have no appointments or other items for you. Just appreciate all that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That speeds the meeting up fast. So let's go with items of special interest. 6A, Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Maddie Soto? Or you're not Maddie? I'll stand in for Maddie. Okay, I was going to say, from CAPSA. Appreciate you brought a little pamphlet up here for us.
Yes.
So, okay.
So I'm James Boyd. I'm part of the executive team at CAPSA. As you know, October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. In Utah, 1 in 3 women and 1 in 5 men will experience domestic violence or sexual abuse in their lifetime. And this staggering number is hard to imagine, but you can see the support and response that CAPSA provides in our community. Last year, we helped 2,677 women, men, and accompanied children with direct services in our community. These are services including shelter, casework, court advocacy, clinical therapy, children advocacy, and more. And we provide this support because of the support of our community. CAPSA, all of our services are free, only because our community supports. So before I go further, I want to thank you for the awarding of the ARPA funds recently. That will help continue to allow us to provide these services and support individuals in our community. Domestic violence is something we don't think about or hear about so often because it happens behind closed doors. It's happening to people we know in our community. It happens to coworkers, residents, friends, families. And we respond, we don't think about it because it's something oftentimes that's associated with shame, and so people don't talk about it. I know when I started working at CAPSA 9 years ago, I would walk around with my name badge and I would have people who I knew for years come up to me and tell me their CAPSA story or their personal story of escaping abuse and how they wish there was a CAPSA where they're from. And we continue to provide this support to our community for that. This month, You can continue to support this movement, this awareness, by becoming more aware of CAPSA. I know many of you have come on tours of CAPSA. I've seen you at open houses when we did ribbon cuttings. But I encourage you all to come and see the work we're doing. We invite you to come and tour. I can promise that you'll be impressed. And also to learn more about this cause. Many of us are business owners and leaders. Invite CAPS into your business, into your organizations, into your church groups, so that we can share more and train more about this issue. And again, I want to thank you and our community for supporting this work and allowing us to do this essential life-saving and life-changing supportive services. Any questions?
Thank you for the service you provide.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. We really do.
Thank you.
It's our pleasure to actually be here to allocate those monies to where it gets where it is needed.
Thank you.
You do a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Let's go with Mayor Craig Hidalgo. Will you go ahead and, actually, excuse me, back up. I'm sorry, I jumped ahead.
Okay.
I saw you and I thought, let's already have you, but let's go back. 2022 external audit, Joan Simpkins. Kind of looking at you, and I was looking at back there with the Joan Simpkins rep. Go ahead.
Thank you. Most people don't want to talk to auditors, so I can understand. My name is Jason Slide. I'm an audit partner with Joan Simpkins. We're a CPA firm based here in Logan, and we performed the 2022 financial statement audit for the county. We appreciate working with the county, and I'd just like to express the appreciation of both me and my partners for allowing us to do your work. We're presenting to you in October this year, which is a little bit later than usual, and I'll explain that in a little bit. You should have all received copies of the financial statements in your media packets. We won't go into great detail because it is near the end of October, and this is related to the financial statements ending December 31st of 2022, so nearly 10 months ago. But just to explain, in an audit, what we do is we take your financial statements. These financial statements are the responsibility of management, and they include just your regular financial statements for the government. Those are government-wide statements, fund statements, component unit statements, and then notes and everything else combined, and it basically discusses how the county is doing on a numbers basis. There's also supplementary information that's included based on pension plans that the county participates in, budgetary information, and other required information that needs to be discussed in your financial statements. And then finally, there's a schedule of federal expenditures regarding the federal funds that were received during the year, but not necessarily received, but those that were spent. So federal grants that were spent during the year. So we take those financial statements and then we perform an audit of those financial statements. And as a result of our audit, we're required to express an opinion. And we do that through the issuance of reports. We issue 4 separate reports for Cache County. We issue an auditor's report on the correctness or material correctness of the financial statements. We issue a report related to internal controls. We issue a report related to your schedule of federal expenditures. And then the state auditor's office requires us to issue a report related to compliance with various state statutes and laws. Just quickly, page 3 is where we issue the financial statement audit report. That report, in order to do that, we're required to obtain reasonable assurance that the financial statements are being prepared and presented in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America. We don't, when we come do that, we don't test 100% of everything. This audit is not an absolute audit. It's based on a risk-based approach. We sample, we look at significant items, but we don't look at 100% of everything. If we did, it would take much too long. And so using our understanding of your controls that are in place, our understanding of the abilities of your people, different things like that, we come up with a risk-based approach and we perform our audit so that we can express an opinion as to whether the financial statements are materially correct. That doesn't mean that there could be errors in your financial statements since we're not looking at everything. But we feel good that they're materially correct. So that is our opinion, that these financial statements are materially correct. The second report, which is found on page 94, is related to internal controls. Those, we're not required to test your controls. So for example, if a control is that the accounting supervisor reviews every bank reconciliation and signs off on that, if we were testing that, we would obtain all bank reconciliations and we'd make sure that was happening. We're not required to do that. Instead, we're required to gain an understanding of those controls. And if we identify any issues during that understanding, where we're gaining that understanding, then we're required to report that to you. And there are some issues that we'll discuss at the end. And then on page 96, we're required to report on whether or not the county is in compliance with federal compliance requirements for major federal awards. Not every federal award, but major federal awards. The county spent $22 million in federal funds this year. That's the county and all of its component units. That includes like the health department, the airport. We don't test all 22 million in expenditures. Again, we look at large significant items. And so we'll talk about that in a minute as well. And then finally, we issue a state compliance report related to the county's compliance with state statutes and code. That includes items related to like budgets, cash management, things like that. And that's on page 105. And then the results of our findings are on page 99. And that's really what I wanted to go over today is the results of our findings. So the reason why we're a little bit behind this year is we left the audit open due to the fact that there was an ongoing investigation by a state agency. We like to or are required to keep it open just to see if there's any need to adjust the financial statements based on the results of that investigation. There was no adjustment made to the financial statements as a result of that investigation, even though there was a monetary amount that was identified that needed to be returned, but it was immaterial to 2022, so it was recommended by management, and we were okay with the fact of not including that in the financial statements. There is reference to it, though, in the notes to the financial statements. But during our audit, just to quickly point out, we identified, in gaining an understanding of controls, we identified a couple of deficiencies that we considered to be significant. There's material and then significant, material weakness and significant deficiencies. Both of these we felt weren't quite material weaknesses, but rose to the level that they needed to be included in the financial statements as a finding. The first is related to procurement policies, and we've already presented this to the audit committee, and we're under the understanding that most of these have already been corrected. But there's a finding related to your procurement policies and procedures where bids were not being obtained when required. We're under the understanding that's been corrected. And then there was a separate finding where we identified that timekeeping wasn't maintained in all departments, especially those that are submitting grant reimbursement requests. When time is involved, that's a necessary requirement, but we understand that that's been corrected as well. And then related to federal awards, we tested your WIC funds, that's all through the health department, the ARPA funds, and then a couple other WIC, substance abuse and epidemiology programs. Within the ARPA funds, we did identify an issue related to the lack of bids, obtaining bids as well. So that finding happens twice, but it needs to be reported twice because it was one related to internal controls of the county and then two related to federal awards. So I just wanted to point those out, but again, we're under the understanding that those have been corrected since year end, and there's a plan moving forward in addressing those and hoping to improve that. That's really what I wanted to go over. Are there any questions about the audit or yes?
So on your finding of bids and that, was that countywide? Was it specific department? Dollar amounts of the bids? What can you tell me on that?
So I would say it's countywide. We found it in multiple places. The interesting thing is the finance department identified the issue first. They would put a tag on it that says not compliant. which I guess there's a control there that identified that you weren't in compliance, but the process had already happened. And so even though they tagged it, they couldn't go back and erase what had already been done. So yeah, it's when, I would say countywide, yes. We've noticed it multiple times.
So if you noticed something in the report, was there any indication that finance went back to that department and said,
No,
look,
no.
what's going
It
on?
was just the fact that it was identified as not in compliance. But there was no documentation of communication as to whether or not there was communication back to the department head.
So then where did you get the understanding that it had been corrected?
That's just in the audit committee that it's been discussed, that policies have been, not necessarily corrected, I guess, there's policies that have been implemented to prevent it from happening in the future.
So we had policies to begin with to stop that going though,
Right,
too.
so that would be next year's audit in determining whether or not that's truly happening.
Okay.
And these were not the same things, that they were not
Separate
found in
items.
2021.
2022, this all happened in 2022. We're auditing fiscal year 2022.
But the same deficiencies were not apparent in...
They were not identified in previous years, no. This is a newer deficiency.
It'd be good for us to know what happened to create that deficiency.
I think it's a lack of understanding of purchasing policies by your department heads is really what it is. Because department heads approve purchases.
We appreciate it, you know, but I'm just,
Yep, that's the primary
those things
reason.
should have been brought out fairly fast, I would have thought.
Within,
the Audit committee. So,
yeah,
thank you.
yep.
Any other?
I don't know if you covered this, but as I read this, I zeroed in on significant deficiency in internal control over major federal programs.
Yep.
I guess that comes from the audit and everything else that you're
Yes, so
talking about.
that's related to your federal expenditures. So it's a separate report. The county spent 22 million. And this is we went over this with the audit committee as well. Federal's audit requirements, what they require you to do is you look at your total expenditures. They were 22 million across the board. You break those expenditures down by grant. So you might be getting 10 million from Department of Transportation, and you might be getting 10 million from USDA, something like that. And then once you've identified all of those different grants, you first pull out everything that's above 750,000, and then you test those, unless they've been tested in the last 2 years. But you do those first. And then after you've done that, you pull out everything between roughly 188,000 and 750,000, and you test some of those if you didn't test all of the amounts over 750,000. And then anything below 188,000, you're not required to look at. And after doing all this testing, if we've hit anywhere between 20 and 40% coverage, we've done enough. Those are the audit requirements. So I would say that's the issue related to the investigation that we were waiting on happened with a grant that was usually below $100,000. So it was never going to be included in this rotation of testing because it was never big enough to do so. And so we did also suggest verbally to the audit committee that it would be a good thing to have your auditor internally review smaller grants on a rotational basis to prevent that from happening. But this finding was related to a large grant, and it was the bid issue.
Okay.
Other questions?
Okay, well, thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Jason. Appreciate that very much. Now, Mayor Hidalgo, you're, I guess, chairman of the COG,
Yes.
so you'll share your report with us?
Yeah, not sure I like the idea of having to follow an audit report.
Would you like an auditor to follow you then?
No,
Okay.
no, I think we're doing good. Hey, this year I just wanted to come and report what the Cache County Council of Governments accomplished as far as this 2023 COG funding recommendations. I think you all have in your packet a copy of the recommendations. We had 13 presentations that were given to us. We had a total of $7.1 million and after county oversight, we had just under 6.9 million, or 6.9 million, just under 7 million. We were able to award 5 of the major projects with nearly all their funding except for one. And as far as the rules set aside, we were only able to, we gave them nearly all of theirs. They wanted 970, they got 896. That decision was based mainly on safety and what the council decided there. The board, the mayors and stuff, I thought it was a very good year this year. We went through the vote. We had one vote that was no. After 45 minutes later, that was changed to a yay. So I think we were very successful in this year's presentations and award of the funds. Any questions?
I have one.
Yes.
So when we determine where we're going to go, is there public input or is there outreach to the citizens who are affected by these, if there is effect going on, and that is talked with them heavily, or how do we sit on that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. All of our meetings are public meetings. So even with that, all the meetings that are held and all, part of the requirements in this is that each presentation has to be held in a public setting. So yeah, the publics are involved in this. They do see the outcome. It's reported in a public meeting. So.
But do we reach out to the citizens who may not have been there if it's affecting properties or anything else? I'm just saying that if it's affecting property, do we get to talk to them and see what's going on from a standpoint of how that government's affecting private property?
Jesse?
So as far as that goes, I know there was an issue arose a few years ago with Providence, and then the policy was changed at that point that each individual jurisdiction needed to hold a public hearing. So at that point, again, they need to follow the state code for setting those public hearings, and kind of it'd be up to them to go out and talk to those property owners, and hopefully as these projects have matured and they've looked at right of way and they've done those things, hopefully those jurisdictions have done some of that homework to figure out what they need, or if they need to go out and talk with some of those people.
But if I may, Chair, that's later, right?
That's already happened.
Oh,
So that's a requirement prior to receiving funding, is that those cities or towns have held their own public hearing, and those legislative bodies have had the opportunity to hear the complaints from their citizens versus maybe them showing up tonight to make issue to the county council. The idea was they should be able to go to their own jurisdiction, and this year we changed it so that it used to just be the jurisdiction that was making application. This year it was changed so that any jurisdiction that had right-of-way involved with the project. So again, there were 2 public hearings that we held in this meeting for projects that involved county right-of-way, where the public would have had the opportunity to come and make issue to this body to say, hey, we don't like that, it involves the county right-of-way, and everyone's required to hold that to consider their applications complete.
So there's 3 significant parts or bids, and those are Logan, Hyde Park, and Nibley, and so those individual municipalities would have held or should have contacted citizens that are involved in any of those aspects of construction.
That's correct.
Okay, that helps me understand that from a
Yes, they do.
county standpoint.
Yeah, and again, just for Logan's and Nibley's, for projects 1 and 2, those were shortfall projects. So those were projects that have received some type of funding in the past. So Logan's been spending the last 3 or 4 years working through their right-of-way, obtaining that right-of-way. I think they all have it 100% now, and that way they'll be ready to go to construction. And then their mayor of Hyde Park's been working with those landowners. He was able to receive a lot of right-of-way that was dedicated at no cost to the city, that they're able to use as part of their match and help save taxpayer dollars by going and say, hey, if you were coming to develop, you ought to dedicate this anyway. If you dedicate it now, it helps our project. So a lot of the times there's the benefits that the mayors and the cities have in working with those property owners to see what they can get donated, as that helps tax funds go farther and get more of their projects completed.
So if a citizen's here tonight wondering what's going on that, and it's in a particular city, then they've got to reach out to the city more or less on that particular.
Yeah, we would expect from a COG standpoint that once we go through this process, all the results are communicated back to their individual communities, so that they are aware of what's happened and how it happened, and what we need to do in the future to improve likelihood of future bids and stuff like that. Yeah, that's, each community is required to do that.
Okay, that helps.
But as far as the COG, do I as executive committee or any of my, no, we don't try to reach out to anybody. We expect that of the mayors.
And I would expect that, because it's hard for a county person to step in a municipality and talk to them when it's their domain. So, thanks, Mayor.
Okay?
Any other questions?
Okay, so I guess it's a motion to
Yep,
accept.
I'd entertain a motion for approval or denial, whatever.
I move to approve the 2023 Council of Governments project recommendations.
Second it.
Moved and seconded that we approve the 2023 COG funding recommendations. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I abstain.
And one abstain. So I will vote in favor. So, okay,
Thank you, appreciate that.
go for it. Okay, let's now go on to the request to amend the previous ARPA award. Do we have? Okay.
That's me. Back in April of 2022, board member Gina Worthen made a motion with regards to some ARPA funding for us. She was rather surprised, and so was I, to find out that there were two facets of the behavioral health care that we had included: training as well as on-scene and on therapy for victims of crime if they didn't qualify for crime victim reparations. And she thought that had been passed. I thought it had been passed, but the therapy part, when we looked at it, it looks like it says behavioral health care, but what was put in there was basically the training. All we're asking is for transparency purposes to include the behavioral health care that was primarily what we wanted, which was to assist victims with out-of-pocket expenses for mental health if they were victims of crime. We've had a couple of serious homicides. We're helping those families, and that's basically what we were asking. When I talked to Gina, she was rather surprised. We both thought this was included. She meant for it to be included.
It's not a dollar change, just.
No, it's just basically we just need this to reflect that it includes behavioral health care, not just training, but therapy as well.
Okay, do we need that amendment written out?
I don't know. What do we want, Alma?
As long as the council is aware of it and you agree to it, I think that's all that we would need. Because it's not a change in the budget.
It's not a change to the budget, and it's an approved ARPA use. So as long as the council doesn't have a problem with it, and I think that can just be made by a voice vote today.
That was in 2022.
April of 2022.
Yeah.
I want to say it was like April 30th, maybe? I'll take a wild guess. It was April 30th, 2022, a Tuesday.
So I would entertain I would entertain a motion to, I guess, amend previous action in April of 2022 of the victims, the funding of behavioral therapy services to include
Behavioral health care.
behavioral health care.
So moved.
Okay, is there a second? Moved and seconded that we do that. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So that amendment's been changed, so we just have, that includes in that, so for you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
that'll help. We understand. They're the little sticklers in those federal grants that,
Yes.
yeah, that raise the dander on auditors. So, appreciate that. Let's go ahead and move into, let's see, 5:30. Let's go to public hearings. We get two of them to set. I'd entertain motions on setting those.
Mr. Chair, I move to set public hearing for November 7th, 2023, ordinance 2023-37. amending Title 16 subdivision regulations to comply with SB 174, local land use and redevelopment revisions, as well as to set the public hearing for November 7th, 2023, ordinance 2023-38, and public hearing for resolution 2023-20, opening the 2023 budget.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
I have a question first, though. I just received an email, it's talking from the state about compliance training for county officials on SB 174, and that's not until November 8th. Can we push this till the following so that attendance to this government training can be happening on SB 174?
That's a good,
Well, isn't it just it's a public hearing? We don't have to take decision on it that day.
we don't have to enter, we won't, you know, we don't have to act on anything on that day. It's just a matter of have a public hearing, but we'd be good to have training for anyone
My
that came to
thoughts.
the public
Yeah,
hearing to be able to answer those questions.
I mean, it just came in today.
From who? Yeah.
From UAC.
Who? I don't think I see it. Oh, yes, I do.
Is that from UAC?
Adam Kolowitz.
Adam Kolowick, yeah. SB 174, compliance training for county officials, November 8th.
Is that,
The UAC cordially invites you to a pivotal training event regarding recent legislative changes under Senate Bill 174.
so that, and that's Zoom or?
I had to,
It is,
Zoom,
it is
it's
Zoom.
Zoom.
Zoom,
Yeah.
yep.
At 10 o'clock.
I mean, when the speaker was here, we talked about the differences of this subdivision rule versus municipalities and counties. That there was different weights as to that, so I don't know if this will do it, I doubt it, but
Should we maybe, like you mentioned, set that, is there any purpose that would have to be maybe acted upon on November 7th at all? Would you? We looked at legal and then pop up and know about it.
Yeah. So there's not a rush. We just need to have the ordinance approved by February of this upcoming year. And so the county council, if you want to delay it at all or take some time, you're more than welcome to.
Why don't we just, like, you know, how about if we just postpone this one and set that public hearing? Could we, from November 7th to November
November 28th.
28th?
Good. Dan, do you know if we can set a public hearing on a day different than what's on the agenda?
I don't know that question off the top of my head.
Yeah, it's,
Well, I
I-
would think we could, since we're setting the public hearing.
Yes,
I think as long as it's late.
See?
as long as it's,
Yeah.
It can't be any earlier.
And
that work
I
out?
think as long as you do the right advertisement.
yeah, as long as it's noticed up correctly, I don't see a reason why you couldn't.
Okay, then with that, we have a motion to set it for the November 7th of all three of those. Is there an amendment change to that motion? Possibly.
I would make a motion, we amend the public hearing for ordinance SB 174 till November 28th, which gives time for those who want to attend that training, I know I will be attending it, to get some ideas of what's going on there.
Is there a second?
Second it.
It's been moved and second. We amend the main motion and change it for the ordinance 2023-37 from November 7th to November 28th. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, it has been changed. It is now open for discussion on the main motion, which was state to set the public hearing on all three as stated. Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of setting the public hearing for the 2023-37 for the 28, ordinance 2023-38 for November 7th, and resolution 2023-20 for November 7th, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Public hearing then will be set. Thank you. Looks like we have a estimated 6 o'clock ordinance. I guess we can, let's, how about if we go with some pending action? Let's go down to 9B, give a little more time on the public hearing for the adopting of the 2024 Cache County budget for a little bit. We'll wait just a little bit, get that closer to 6 o'clock. Go to 9B, ordinance 2023-35 on the discussion on separation of the office of the Cache County Auditor and Cache County Clerk beginning in the year 2025.
Well, if I can begin a discussion here, I've been pondering over this, worried about the additional cost of doing that, wondering if we're maybe jumping into this too quickly without really looking at what all of the ins and outs that can occur with this, doing it this way. I spoke with Val Potter today, and I spoke with Greg Merrill, who both were on the council before or when the offices were combined, and they expressed their reasoning for combining them in the first place. And I think it may have some consequences by separating them at this time without us adequately vetting what's going to happen or what could happen in this process. So I would vote to not separate those offices at this time and not jump into it without some careful consideration and vetting. I don't feel like maybe some of you have, but as I've tried to read through this and look at what some of the possible consequences could be, I thought, I've got to look at this more. I just don't think that's something we can make a decision on in just 2 or 3 weeks in pondering this thing without some detailed looking at it. Amy presented the budget issues regarding it, and yes, it would cost us more by separating it. We're in a bit of a budget crisis as we stand, and adding to that, in my mind, isn't wise.
I also talked with Mr. Potter. I also listened and read the email from Mr. Benson. You got to sit and weigh. I found it interesting today when Amy told us they've hired a person for this, but they did not want to be a chief deputy. There's where I from with what we've gone through on the budget right now and not getting it on time or getting it where we have adequate time to review and adapt to what's going on versus what we face this year. I really want to know that the person who sits and is over finances, the council has some input onto that so that we know that we have a qualified, adequate person. And we discussed this last time when we open it for vote. We don't have that ability, and then that person who becomes an auditor, if we split that, who is voted, gets to run that the way they want to. And it's outside of what the council gets the jurisdiction on it or anything else from there, and yet we're over the budget. So I see a conflict a little bit that I just want to see come down, that the council has some ability when we're strictly over the budget, that we get to work and understand exactly what's going on inside of that finance person, if that makes sense.
And I totally agree with that.
So, I don't know, we're here to weigh both of those out. I understand what Mr. Benson's talking about. I understand what Micah presented last time, that if we just post it for the auditor, maybe we get a person who's qualified for the auditor. But maybe is a portion that I haven't come.
That's the key word, is maybe, because they're elected by the people, and they don't have to have any specific credentials to be able to fill that office.
I mean, I'm open to hearing opinions from the council, but I really want, if we're sitting here over the budget, something that the council has some input onto that person who's helping us with the budget in the finance area. And I just worry we lose that if we bring in an elected auditor, or, I mean, we still have vision over it, but our input is restricted some.
Yeah.
So, just from my understanding, if we didn't open it up for election, would that mean that the council is over that person and appoints someone for that, or how
Well,
does that work?
Not directly, but as Mr. Potter pointed out, if you have an auditor who is elected, then your ability is even less than what it is now,
Right.
is my understanding. Amy, can you explain? I'm asking you on this.
Well, another issue
It
is
would
too
be
that
Okay,
the
well, about the position where that
audit
person.
committee by council vote could be given additional responsibilities in overseeing what happens in the auditor's office and what goes on in that venue. And thereby the council maintains closer control over the finances.
That makes
Just to
sense.
clarify, we're not casting aspersions on the current auditor.
No, no.
We're just, but with the addition of the financial responsibilities, when we received that letter from Val Potter and Greg Merrill, at the time they were put together, the auditor did not have control over the finances, so there's a different circumstance. And so I like,
They did.
yeah, I like.
There
knowing
were
that
several
here,
other
but-
circumstances in that whole process that I know are not shared, but
Yeah.
Well, and I also explained to Mr. Potter what we went through this year and what we're facing, and given that, it makes sense to have an auditor who is there, but my whole concern is the training and the credentials of the auditor, or something that the council has input on.
I just think we need more time to really study this. And,
Do we have more time?
No.
well, we don't have more time if we want them to be elected in 2025.
That's correct.
But
But if the same ordinance passed a month from now, the soonest it could be put into effect would be first week of January of 2027.
Yeah.
For the 2026 election.
And again, in my mind, this is a significant enough decision that we need to spend some time to vet it, that we're not necessarily in a rush to have to create a separation.
Nolan, what you're suggesting is we leave it the way it is for the elected position, but that the council consider hiring or appointing an auditor with financial credentials that works on our
For the
behalf.
audit committee. Yeah.
For the audit, and through the audit committee.
Right.
you know, and the thing is, you can still, you know, the audit committee, we can still do that, even if you have an elected auditor.
Yeah.
You know, and they still would have to basically, you know, the audit committee and fulfill the legislative functions of the Cache County Council. They still then must do their auditor's role according to, again, Cache County statute, we then state statute and so forth. And so I'm sitting there going, I don't, you know, the person is the auditor, they are the facilitator to make sure these things get done. Just like, and the personnel that are under them are, you know, they're also, you know, they'll be hired qualified people that you, to do those audits and to fully, just like right now that we have such high quality people that are doing those things right now, they will continue to do those. And the auditor will maybe change over time.
Mr. Chair, if I could just
Yeah, go ahead.
add something from a legal perspective. Really, there's no functional difference between this legally as the current setup. We still have an elected auditor, so anything that the council can do or will do related to our auditor's office would be the same. It's just having, it's whether the county wants to have one person taking on that full audit responsibility plus the clerk responsibility, or having someone focused specifically on the auditing responsibility and someone's focusing specifically on the clerk responsibility. That's not, I'm not speaking in favor, that's just the difference, because right now Mr. Benson has both of those responsibilities, so whether he has a chief deputy or someone who has required to have credential financial background is up to the council, and that would be the same. It's just a difference of having one person in charge of both responsibilities or having those split between two people. So it's still up to the voters who is in charge of that. So that, I just wanted to clarify that.
And see, that's one of the very reasons that I am in favor of splitting it, is because of that, you know, then we have someone that's, again, with the focus that we've shifted and the financial responsibilities that we are now sending to that auditor. I think that it is well worth someone, and the problems that we've had in the past, I want those to be looked at, you know, more scrutinized within, you know, under one entity that's working with it. We are watching it closer. We beef up our auditing committee, whatever it may be, but I think that overall and in the long run, and our growth is going to merit it anyway, so.
Did you want to say something, David?
Oh,
Yes, if that's
and then Catherine's got to.
Okay. Currently, the way the auditor's office is structured is that there's the elected official, and then underneath that, there are essentially two functional areas, the tax administration and the finance administration. The finance administration supervisor, who is taking we have a new staff member coming on board to replace Phil Noble. That role, that responsibility, does have requirements for CPA. So regardless of who may be elected as the auditor, the staff position does have those financial credentials that some of you might be worried about whether the finance department will have or not. And so the job description that our personnel office has put together essentially guarantees that whoever's filling that role will have the hard accounting skills that the county is looking for. I don't know if that clears anything up or not, but.
Yeah, I said my piece last meeting about this quite a bit, that I didn't feel it was necessary to separate them, because as elected officials, we can get anybody in as elected official. Proof of the 7 of us right here. So that's, but we can have some, without having to have, and I see it more as a figurehead, because we don't know exactly how they're going to execute their role. We can't control that, right? We can't, because that's a fellow elected official. So that's why I am in favor of highly professional staff that's going to be accountable to the audit committee, as we've spoken about today, or another body that would be responsible for that.
I guess I just see it as a increasing the cost, the overhead and bureaucracy of the county, because it'll be an office that will grow.
And to me, it is one of the most important, you know, the taxpayers' money and overseeing that to the very penny. I appreciate the audit that we heard today, but if it's not under $188,000, we don't worry about it. I'm sorry. I really think internally we need to look at every penny. And so.
Granted, but I think we can do that without having to create another office.
I don't know.
Dane brings out a good point. I mean, we're dealing with an elected auditor no matter what we do.
I had something that.
Go ahead, Mike.
Discussions that, this kind of came up this morning. I met with Barbara and Catherine and we talked about this, and one of the things that instigated this discussion was a letter from Mr. Benson, and the changes that the council has made in that office have put a lot on the plate of the current clerk auditor and all future clerk auditors, as long as that office is combined. But another thing that did was it interfered with the separation that the county needs to have between the body that's conducting internal audits and the body that is doing the accounting. That's now the same body. And so the county council needs to consider how that change has affected or can affect future internal audits. And one thing that might kind of kill two birds with one stone would be the council bringing more audit, taking more of a stronger audit authority for itself through an auditor who would answer to the audit committee. That at the same time could take things off the plate of our county auditor. Now, in our workshop today, Mr. Benson explained how he had cut that budget. So it's already halfway there. And if the council were to take more of an active role in internal audits, that would take some things off the plate of the auditor, while also reinstituting that important separation between the body that's conducting audits and the body that's doing the accounting. Something to consider. And that would be true irrespective of whether the office is separated. So that actually doesn't even really speak to this particular ordinance. Something kind of beyond it.
So, may I ask a question of Mr. Benson?
Of course.
With the recent change the county did on the finance area and everything else, do you feel that puts a heavier burden? I'm sure it does, but can you meet that burden the way it sits now?
Yes, it does present a heavier burden. Staff supervision has gone up over 100%. Functional areas have increased by 33%. I've purposely not asked for a deputy either in the clerk or the auditor's area. Part of that is to preserve funding so that I don't go over budget, and I want to be as fiscally conservative as possible. The other consideration is one that our personnel director has brought up, and that is that deputies are often seen as a political entity, and one of my goals is to avoid any political issues with staff members. Obviously, elected officials can't avoid that, but as far as staff goes, continuity and expertise is more important than mine. Can I personally handle the volume over the next years as a condensed office? Yes. Can future elected officials handle the combined responsibility? Yes, probably. It depends on that individual. And I guess that's the unknown, because I won't be the clerk auditor forever. Whoever follows me, will they be able to handle the workload? We don't know. But it is a significant increase in workload.
I worry, what I worry is that there are, with overload there, I mean, there's a lot happening. And if there was an independent auditor, its own office, I feel that then the audits that are requested, the audits that may happen and that should happen monthly, more frequent and everything, I feel like they probably would start happening. I know with the combination of when that was combined, the number of internal audits that was done, there was a hired auditor, and the total number of audits that were being accomplished from within was way down. So there were a lot of things that should be continually audited, and we talk about things in O&P, ordinance policy. You know, we need to look at this, we need to look at this. And these are things that should, monthly, quarterly, or whatever, should be happening already within our auditor, but our auditors, previous auditors, even before your time and before Jess's time, things that just, they weren't happening. They just weren't happening because they were just combined, and they just kind of decided which priorities to make it, and they had a little part-time one that was hired, and not a whole lot got done there. And so I think that if we brought that out, maybe we'd have more oversight that would be, you know, done internally that I think is necessary. It could have prevented a lot of the things that have happened in the past, the short past. I really do. I think we could have been watching things a lot closer.
Well, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead,
And I feel like this furthers the argument for professional staff, because we do performance reviews for professional staff. Are you doing this, and this as mandated by the council? A performance review for an elected official is an election, and if the people like them, that doesn't necessarily mean they're not gonna get elected if they're not doing those audits as they've been directed.
Well,
Go ahead,
we-
Carl.
We had some negative experiences with the last clerk auditor in his auditing. He kind of took that as his primary role as auditing, and that didn't turn out well. And I guess for me, I need more time to really study this and really determine whether this is the best course of action to take. And I just don't think we have really looked at all of the pros and cons of each side. And to jump into it this quickly is maybe not very wise.
Well, to David's point, if we have an elected auditor that is just an auditor, he's still gonna be over the finances, and there's still not enough separation for him to do all of or him or her to do all of the internal audits.
That's right.
Like, it would still require someone, more determination by the audit committee and an outside, so even if we separate them, that auditor still is gonna have the finances underneath him and is not gonna be the person we want to do all the internal auditing of the finances, right? So, I tend more to say, let's leave it the way it is, but let's really beef up the audit committee and get another, either we hire somebody as a council, or we determine however that works, and I haven't thought about that completely, but to make sure that we have somebody that, at our direction, every month, if it's, okay, we want to see it every month, and this is your job, that would be really, I think that would be more effective, in my mind.
I'm sitting here trying to make sense of this, and I have a what-if question for Dane. I'm trying to figure out, as an elected official, you have to have credentials as the attorney. The sheriff has to have credentials. I'm sitting here wondering why the auditor doesn't have to have credentials to be an auditor. And can I talk to my legislatures, and will anything happen that changes this if we vote this way? Because I'm concerned about what happened here in the county with finances. And when I looked at what we were paying the last finance director versus what we can get for maybe an auditor or something, and Micah had a good point last time, and Mr. Benson, maybe you can explain this. When you ran to be a clerk auditor, were you more focused on the clerk position or the auditor position? Because if we separate it, maybe we get a person who is really in the mode of being an auditor. So I think as a council, we need to sit and say, okay, what's going to help us best for what we just went through and did as a change?
When I ran for the office, I felt like I was fairly equally focused on the two offices. Since I've taken office, because we've had primary and another general election coming up, that has taken more of my time than the focus on the auditor's office, just because out of necessity.
And that comes at a time when our budget process needs to be done, which is the most important time of the year.
Taxation administration had their busiest time, going on at the exact same moment that we were having elections. So even though I was involved in the tax administration, that portion of that office was being handled very efficiently, so I was able to focus on the election. My anticipation next year, as the combined clerk auditor, is to give equal, if not more, focus to the auditor function, just because I'll have bandwidth in order to do that. I've been able to hire good, competent staff, as Councilmember Buse has mentioned, that are able to handle the elections. We've got them trained up, to focus in that area, and use part of my salary to actually perform internal audits in other departments, similar to what was done in 2023. Last thing I might mention is that I have noticed that it is sometimes difficult to give both of those offices the attention that they are due, just because my focus is divided between them.
Gene, that's where my concern comes in, is of all the things that we're over, it's the budget. So Dane, you didn't get to answer my question, so it's probably
So
not very helpful, but
I think you're more than welcome to go talk to your legislators about that.
I will.
I don't think that's going to change.
Probably
Not even
not.
the state auditor, is required to be a CPA or anything along those lines. There's no, educational requirements for that job. So I'm not thinking it's likely that they'll change it for counties.
Okay, thank you.
Well, it's been really quiet down on the far end.
Well, I was admiring the case Mr. Benson just made to give him more time to apply his expertise. Appreciated the wisdom in your statement that, out of necessity, you've had to focus more on clerk, but next year, that'll be very different. Your calendar will be very different.
I worry about the election time. Your point's
The
good.
staffing and you're managing your department is your role, and I believe you have the ability to carry that out in both offices right now. So I'm not interested in rushing into something like this. I think there's major implications and unintended consequences. I haven't had the chance to wade through all of them and to narrow out enough to feel confident that I'm ready to move in this direction.
However, I do see when Mr. Benson says he'll spend more of his time doing those internal audits, again, he's over the finances. Is there enough separation in how that works? And I don't know that I understand it completely.
Yeah, that's my issue. I just haven't had enough time really to analyze this and see what unintended consequences might come as a result of it. When Jill was in, things seemed to work fine for a long time. And before that, is when we had a separate auditor and clerk is when they ran into problems. So there just doesn't seem to be a clear-cut answer in my mind as to what's going to be the best thing to do. And that's why I propose that we don't act on it yet until we've really had time to do our homework and really decide what's going to be the best.
Given what the discussion is, I'm going to change my mind and say I support splitting it, just because of what we brought on as a finance situation from the changes. So I want the extra eyes. Whether I get that from a qualified person or not, I don't know, but I worry about either way. So I'm just, as a council, we did those changes, and so now I want to make sure those changes go through properly for the rest of time and for audits and for budgets, so.
I will say that.
Well, why don't we have a vote?
Yeah, I will say first that I have confidence in the people. Hopefully they vet this person, whoever they vote for, and then if something changes when they're through that process and the people have that person in there, then the council, if we have to tighten budgets, we have to put, some more legislative things to make sure things are done appropriately. That's what our job is. But I still think I am also very much in favor of splitting it for the fact that we do need someone to really watch over these things tightly. Now, you mentioned that the previous clerk auditor spent a lot of time, all of a sudden jumped into the audits that very last year. Yes, they did. How many of those were approved by the audit committee?
Well, none were. But,
That's right, okay.
But I don't think that was a requirement.
That's where we beef up the audit committee, and then we send those requests via the audit committee to the auditor. The auditor will take care of those. We make it to where those very stringent things, and we have someone specific that will have that time to do it. That's what and for just freelancing, say, I just want to audit this and that. No, there needs to be some detail, but we need someone in there that will take those marching orders from the audit committee, so forth.
But whether we split or not, and I'm still trying to weigh that in my mind either way, we can't have the auditor who is over the finance department also being in charge of conducting all those internal audits, can we? That's what I'm trying to decide, like, we're still
Now,
gonna need a different.
Financial audits or audits, I mean, there's several different audits that they can be doing.
Might be a distinction between financial audits and performance audits.
Yes.
Okay, so the auditor would do performance audits. We would need another venue to handle financial audits. If we wanted something on a monthly basis, it wouldn't be someone from the auditor's department who did that, whether we split the jobs or not, correct? Am I correct? That's what I want to understand.
Go ahead.
If I can, so there's a couple different things that have been brought up. I think the audit committee can give recommendations, but the auditor still is elected official, so that you can't prevent him from doing any specific audits, and can initiate audits on his own. But I do think it's a good practice to, as a county, have that committee to give recommendations to kind of focus the attention. The auditor would also be able to do audits of other departments' financials. But that wouldn't be like the audit we saw today where they're doing an outside audit of our finances, which is required by law. More of the audits being conducted by the auditor's office would be, are we in compliance with county statutes and regulations, so the performance, or are we complying with our procurement process and things along those lines, rather than auditing the books that they're also looking at. That's what our financial audit is for. That's what the executive's audit powers are for, and what the council's audit powers are for. So while they are the auditor, there are other things in place to prevent the auditor from auditing the books that they're in charge of, if that makes sense.
Just one more question, Mr. Benson. You have sent us a letter that kind of contradicted themselves. Where do you stand at this point? If it was your choice, would you split the two jobs?
Yes, when I was approached individually by a couple of you, I initially indicated I thought it would be better to leave them combined, because the county has undergone a lot of change recently, and it might be good to have a little bit of time to settle in and implement some of the best practices that we're attempting to implement with the change in the finance area. And upon further reflection, I've changed that because I feel like ultimately the best approach is to separate the two offices, whether we do it now or in the future. And I think it would be in the county's best interest simply to initiate that change as quickly as possible if it's going to happen. If it's going to happen, it might as well be now, so that we can start working with the new elected officials and with the separation of those two offices. It might be a little rocky because of some of the changes we've made in the past, but I still think that's the better approach for the long term. I think it's based on principle of the structure and allowing the two offices to have the focus that they need. We may not be able to implement all the best practices if we implement it right away, the change, the separation. However, there's not going to be a perfect situation with either choice. And so I'm now leaning towards separating the two offices.
It would be another 11, 12, or 13 months.
14 months.
13 or 14 months
hopefully
before it
this
took place.
process is in place.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
And frankly, if you delayed, it would only be another 2 years after that as well. So in the large scheme, it may not be a long time to wait. But
Barbara.
it's a good decision.
I think Micah brings up a very good point. The wall is down, and we need to put a wall back up and have a good checks and balances and a good process for taking care of that. So I am voting in favor of separating the offices.
I will make a motion if the discussion is done. Anybody else?
Yep. Go ahead.
On ordinance 2023-35, I make a motion that we do separate the office of the auditor and the clerk beginning in the year of 2025.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded that we approve ordinance 2023-35 on the separation of the Cache County Auditor and the Cache County Clerk beginning the year 2025. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, proceed to vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Got those?
Aye.
Aye, 2, 3. Catherine?
Nay.
Nay. All those opposed?
Nay.
Okay, so it is 4 to 3. So the motion passes. Dang, I wanted to hit the gavel. So, okay, let's move on. Public hearing, this is a little bit past 6 o'clock on adopting the 2024 Cache County budget. Brittany, would you share a few things? It is everyone is begging for concrete mud these days. And right now, the budget right now is still mud, and it won't dry yet. So it seems like it's pretty liquid, and so share with what you've got there. I have a feeling there's going to be a subject to a lot of change.
Well, I don't have anything additional to say about the tentative budget that was presented by Phil and the executive about a month ago. But I did have a few things on the amendments, and I didn't know if these were right here. Later in the meeting? Okay. Then I don't have anything at this point then. Unless you have questions.
We will be hearing a lot about them, I know. But then at that point, Brittany, if you'll hang on, just kind of stay there or near, we'll go ahead and open up the public hearing. It's now open for any discussion of the public hearing on the budget for 2024. Anyone that would like to speak, please come up and state your name. And go ahead.
Is that 23 or 24?
24.
2024.
Is this yours? John Drew, Cache Humane Society, Board President. Been a board member for 7 years, board president for 6 years. I have a question on one item that came up during the workshop. Council member Goodlander raised a question on the sheriff, and it had to do with the $445,000 that was set aside in the 2024 budget for the impound operations. It was $445,000. She asked the question of the sheriff. She said, it sounds like a net zero cost to the county taxpayers. Sandy, I think you were asking the question, if I'm correctly, are the fees going to catch up and cover those operating costs eventually? Am I correct?
No, I misunderstood what I was looking at. This is my first year to look at the budget, and the item that there was the impound fees was part of that, 118,000, I believe. The other 300 and something thousand said property tax, and I was under the impression, I just didn't zero in on what I was looking at. It was not a well-informed question.
Okay.
So I understand now, but I did not at the time.
Okay. Just so there's no misunderstanding, there are no Utah shelters that are operated by county or city governments that covers their costs. There's a substantial cost to the taxpayers. One thing I do want to mention is we did provide impound services to Cache County and Logan City. We parted ways with Logan City. Mayor Daines announced that the city was going to go find another impound provider. And I sat in the meeting when she announced that to myself and the executive director. So that's when the impound impasse started. We have a copy of a signed contract from Sheriff Jensen where he declined additional impound services from Cache County in 2019. I have a copy of that. We did not go out of the impound business, and as we are right now, we're not interested in going into the impound business. The executive director and myself have had a meeting with the sheriff several times. We've talked to some of the county council members here about it. We are taxpayers like everybody else. Just to put things in perspective, the last time Cache County was billed by Cache Humane Society, the last 10 years was, the highest was $4,100. And we also billed, of course, Logan City, but we billed for cat impound, we billed for trap, neuter, and return, we billed for dog impounds, and I think between the two, over the past 10 years, we never billed in total, the two entities for dog impounds, between $10,000, $20,000 total, over a 10-year period of time, per year. So just to put that in perspective, let that sink in. We've offered to the sheriff to offer our services to help out. There are other business models that are operated by other counties here in Utah that we recommended the sheriff take a look at that would significantly reduce the cost to the taxpayers here in Cache County, and we are open to doing that. So that's my 2 cents worth. I do want to mention there was the issue that came up that the auditor brought up about procurement. I went back over the past 3.5, 4 years, and I do know that the sheriff brought up this issue with the building the new facility. But I don't find any point in time where there's a, as it would be termed by the auditor, a competitive bidding process, which is in the county code. The county code requires any services or goods to be purchased over $150,000 go through a competitive bidding process. And that contract has to be approved by the council. I don't see it in the agenda items. I don't see it in any of the minutes for the last 3.5 years. So from a procurement standpoint, you folks here you just went through this discussion with the, about the auditor. I think it should not be elected. I used to be an auditor, and it should be separate. And I have good reasons why. One, it shouldn't be political, and two, it should be independent. And elected officials, and I was one, there are no job requirements, so the voters could vote for anybody. It should be under the purview, and I agree with Councilman Buse. She's smiling over there, and the other council members who voted that way, but I guess we're going to have an elected official. So those are my 2 points I wanted to make. I appreciate your time.
Okay, thank you. Any others that would like to speak on behalf of the Cache County Budget 2024? Entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Seconded.
Is it moved and seconded that we close the public hearing? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Public hearing is closed. Okay, let's go ahead and move on down to, here we are. That one's still held off till December 5th. Let's go to, on the initial proposals, 2023-18. I don't think we're ready at all in that. Could we then go ahead and Brittany and stand up and share those?
To the proposed budget, is this what this is?
Amendments to the tentative.
Okay,
To the tentative
okay.
budget that was given to us. Where are those? Here we are, amendments. Yeah, here, 10A. Hold that.
Okay. Okay. So the amendments that I just wanted to kind of point out to you guys, I think they were in your media packets, was number 5, because it's kind of a big one. Let's see, sorry. The fire department was requesting $10,000 to put into their reimbursable fire costs. These expenses are used for standby fees when they go to like Cherry Peak and have events, and then we get reimbursed for them. So it's offset by revenues that we will earn. It's also wildland equipment that we purchase for volunteer departments. It was just a big dollar amount, and I just wanted to point out that it was being offset by expected revenues. The next one that was kind of big was number 8. We did find an error. So I wanted to ask if you guys accept this, that we would need to change that third one down for improvements to the 620 account. It was a type error. What this is for, the 14,100 was for parking and cleanup at the fair. This year, the costs of parking and cleanup exceeded what we were awarded for our RAPS tax. And so we don't estimate what we're going to get for RAPS tax because it hasn't been awarded yet. And we just wanted to make sure that we had enough to cover those costs in case we did not get that funding. So it was just a typo on the amendment. It should be 620 for that 14,100. And then the title of that account is Security and Other Services. The next one is number 12. This one was an error when we were updating the payroll forecasts for the tentative budgets. We didn't catch that one of our formulas didn't go far enough down on the updated payroll forecast, and this position request that was requested by the department was missed when we were updating those payroll forecasts for the tentative budget. And so we wanted to put that in the amendment because the department head did have it requested, but it didn't make it into the ones that we presented to you because our formula was not catching that. So we wanted to put that in here.
Don't we also receive revenue from the canal companies if we're spraying?
I don't know. It's not a department that I help with. I would have to ask the department head and get back.
Section in Public Works,
Is it? Okay, because I saw the PILT and the other, but.
Yeah.
There are fees assessed. I know that. I don't know how they balance out to cost.
Yeah, I figured there would be, yeah. So I'm just wondering where it's input at.
I'm not sure. I would have to look at it and get back to you and talk to the department head. It's not a department I'm familiar with. I'm sorry. The next one is number 13. This was not decided when we presented the tentative budget, but the road department is working on a contract with the airport for snow plowing services, and so this is a cost that would be offset by revenues by that contract. And then the next one is number 14. In the tentative budget that was presented, we were, oh, I'm scrolling too fast, I'm sorry. In the tentative budget, the numbers we were using for the Bear River Health Department were estimated because we did not have their actual numbers. And so now that we've received that invoice and that from them, this is just to update those actual numbers so that we know, have better numbers for the budget. And then in number 15, it was discovered, so we put it in to the budget in the 2024 budget request in June and didn't catch when we amended the 2023 budget that we put this grant for directional signs in the 2023 budget. So this request is to remove the directional sign request from the 2024 budget because it is already in the 23 budget and was awarded in the 2023 year. So any unspent funds we have, we may request to roll forward, but we don't need to have the whole entire amount in 2024. And those were just the ones I just kind of wanted to give some extra explanation on because they were kind of larger or kind of unique.
Thank you. Thanks, Brittany.
Thanks, Brittany. With those and other input that we've had in the past couple of weeks, we probably need to look at a new binder or a new printout. If we can work with getting a new printout and. I haven't even gotten Marcus first. Okay, but things are pretty volatile right now, but I think we really, I don't know, does it work really good for you with a printout?
I like looking at it
I
better
do.
than I do on my.
I do too. I like to write
Yeah,
things.
I
and
like to flip through pages and reference
We,
them.
with all the changes, the updates, compensations, all these kind of things that's been coming to us and everything, to really spell things out, we really need to see things,
That just means if these amendments pass, we just make sure we update those statements of revenue.
Oh, absolutely. We just didn't want to update them until any amendments had been approved. So that's why we haven't yet.
well, it's, I don't know about approving these amendments to the budget 2020.
This is an amendment to the tentative budget?
Yeah.
We don't approve them, right?
It,
Because we
it
approve
wouldn't be
it with
approving,
the
we just say,
budget.
go ahead and add them to it, and then we'll,
Right now, the tentative budget is the resolution before you. So it is, the tentative budget is no different than an ordinance that is before you that you can vote. So any changes you want to make to the tentative budget would come through an amendment that you would vote on. So if you want to add these requests to the tentative budget,
we just need a motion to add them.
you just need a motion
Yeah.
to approve these amendments. You're not approving the budget, you're just approving these amendments.
Well, but then that goes with all the other changes that have occurred, that we've received in the past couple of weeks.
Yeah.
How are we gonna see those in those budgets too?
Well, so the changes from compensation committee will also need to come through an amendment. So we can work with Amy and finance in putting together a set of amendments that would, just like this, that would change the budget. If you'd like, we can, make my life a little easier, to hold off on these amendments tonight, and then to vote on these with the compensation committee. And if some of you have some changes that you talked to me about that we're gonna have ready, I was planning on having those ready by the November 7th meeting regardless. So we would have an.
Let's do that. Let's put all those together, get them all, see the impact of it, and then vote whether do we add those to that tentative budget or not, and go from there.
I have a question too. There are several departments that have come and talked to us now. Since we got the tentative budget, there are departments that have come and said, I need to adjust it these little ways. What about the departments we haven't heard from? Like, if we do one more printout, I'd like it to have everybody's.
I will ask, have you received all the departments? Input from everywhere, is it?
Well, I only work with about half of the departments in the county.
Okay.
And I did not have amendment requests from each of my departments that I help, that I'm assigned to.
I think that if a department wants to make a change, they either need to come to the council, to me.
Right.
Brittany or Loriana, the council, the departments had an opportunity this summer to work with the executive, and certainly they can come to the executive. Ultimately, it needs to come to finance.
I do know, I did come with Terrell to her budget workshop, and her budget workshop was before we presented the tentative budget. And so the changes that she talked to you about in her budget workshop were made and implemented in the tentative budget. So I do know that Terrell's amendments were made before the tentative budget was presented.
Okay. That help?
Right.
Good. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate everything you're doing there. Okay, how about Resolution 2023-19?
I guess I'll talk about that. And maybe he's just running late. But we were supposed to have someone from Zions Bank here to talk about this.
They're being audited.
This is a parameters resolution.
Well, if they're coming, can't we hold this and go fee schedule another thing?
Yeah.
What time were they coming? Good crap.
I don't know. I told them, yes, I do have a phone number. I can send a text.
Yeah, let's.
I told them it wouldn't be right at 5, but I think I said after 6. I think we had a hearing at 6, and so.
Alex, Was it Alex?
It's actually two individuals, Alex Buxton from Zions Bank, and then Brad Patterson,
Pretty
who's
punctual usually.
a bond attorney at Gilmore Bell. But they're both coming from Salt Lake City, so.
Let's reach out to them. Let's go ahead, let's bypass that a second. Let's reach out to them, see where they're at. Let's go ahead and move on to 2023-36. Okay. Well, boy, you're gonna be multitasker and reach out to them at the same time?
Yeah, we may need to do our executive session.
We may have the executive session, then come back out, so. Where's that fee schedule?
So this is ordinance, a couple different departments and offices had to kind of work together on this one. This is an ordinance amending the Cache County Consolidated Fee Schedule. If you go to County Code, it's the very last section of County Code. It's the county fee schedule, where it lists every fee that the county charges and every fee that's been authorized, and each of which has been authorized by the county council. So the ordinance you see is most all of it are related to garbage pickup, which the county has started to implement through the auditor's office, particularly finance, right, is doing that. So these fees were decided upon by the individuals, employees in the finance department. You can see each one of the fees there, and then we actually do need to make an amendment to this ordinance. It's a very small amendment. So what is on the screen is the ordinance before you now. You can see the Utah State Code reference. Those are places in state code that justify, that provide the legal basis for each one of these fees. Before you, every fee has the same reference, but actually two of these fees need to have a slightly different reference. It's these two, it's the ones related to 911. All the other references refer to the municipal services code section of state code, but 911 is not actually municipal service. That fee is, while it is being collected only from the unincorporated counties, it's pass-through money that's really going to Logan City. So we just need to make an amendment to update that reference to this code reference. I don't know if, Dane, you wanted to add anything? This is...
No, it's just using the county's general powers to provide for the safety and welfare of its residents. Is the power where that comes from, and to levy assessments, fees, taxes in order to do that.
So I have a question on late fee. Is that a monthly fee, or does that translate into a yearly percentage? And have we been applying that before, or how are we going to do that?
APR fee?
Benson, do you know?
My understanding of that is that, my understanding is that that is a late fee that we have been applying historically. I don't believe we have any proposed changes to that line.
So is that 1.5% per month?
Oh, my apologies. Yes, 1.5% per month.
Outstanding balance.
It'd be per month.
Okay. And we have been applying it?
Yes, as far as I know.
Okay.
If that was per year, no one would pay, and they'd all try to go make their money somewhere else. Other questions?
Okay, I'll make a motion. Are we ready? Any discussion?
I'll entertain a motion.
On ordinance 2023-36, an ordinance updating the Cache County fee schedule, I move that we accept that, except for the 2911 fee references of the code.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded that we accept ordinance 20 and pass 2023-36, except, again, you say except for the 911 has a different code. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay. Well, let's just give it a little bit more time, or will you feel call Alex, see where they're at on that.
Do we need to make an action on 9A? I know it's been tabled until December 5th, but do we need to, since it's on our agenda, do we need?
No, it'll stay on the agenda. It's just tabled until December 5th, so
Okay.
it'll be stuck there, and we may, something may change before then or something. I don't know. What's that? Is that going to be?
Yeah, we've been in contact with them. They're still working on
There's-
the
yeah.
permission. So when they hear an update, I'll make sure the council knows, so that way you can take appropriate action.
That'll be good. That'll be good. Okay, down there with other business real quick, any other changes to UAC annual convention? Additions? That is always a good one. That's a great, oh, here we are, good. That's a great one. You saw the other reports, expense reports and reconciliation reports. Let's go ahead. Alex, don't you dare sit down. Yes, you heard it.
You're killing time.
You walked.
Brad Patterson, looks like he hasn't made it. I think he's gonna be here around 6:30, so.
Okay, anyway, we don't lollygag around here. We just keep her
Right.
going there.
Well, I was told maybe it'd be around 7 o'clock, so it looks like you guys are moving pretty quickly on the agenda, so.
Well, we
Thanks for,
can go executive session, come back out if you want to wait for us.
Yeah, no, thank you for getting me right in.
Okay, let's go ahead and, on the bond purchase agreements, share that. Go ahead and, we got resolution 2023-19 that we're discussing now, so.
Debt. That's what everybody wants to hear, huh?
Yes. You want me to?
You bet.
Want me
Go
to
ahead.
start? Great. Well, let me
Yep.
just introduce myself. I'm Alex Buxton with Zions Bank Public Finance. I've been working with Cache County for pretty much my whole career, for the last 22 years, I guess. But it's been several years since the county issued a bond. As you all know, last November, the county went out to a bond election for a general obligation bond. Not sure if and when the county has issued a general obligation bond. I don't recall in the amount of time that I've worked with the county that there's been a GO bond. But nonetheless, the county went out and passed an election, a $20 million bond amount for open space needs. And so this last year, I know the county and their open space committee has been working to see where they're going to purchase some of the land for the open space. And my understanding is now they have found some land they'd like to purchase in the Wellsville area, and that they'd like to proceed ahead to issue $6 million of the $20 million that was authorized last November. So the purpose of the meeting tonight, and the bond attorney, I'm sure will be walking in at any time, who put together the resolution, is to adopt what's called a parameters resolution. Basically, what that does is start the process to issue the bond from a legal perspective. This bond would likely be issued over the next 60 days. My understanding in some recent discussions with the Open Space Committee is they'd like to move forward quickly. But we can move as quickly or as slowly as the county desires. But this bond or this resolution doesn't lock anything in at this point in time. The only thing it does is set some outside parameters so that as long as we stay within those parameters, we can proceed ahead and issue the bond. The parameters, I'll go ahead and talk through those since Brad isn't here yet. But the parameters we've set as a maximum amount of bonds is $6 million. The maximum length of term is 20 years, which again was all part of the election that was passed by the voters. The interest rate or coupon we've set at 6.5%. Now that is high, relatively speaking, to what we think we're going to sell the bond at. Part of the reason why we set it at 6.5% is depending on the method of sale, if we sell the bonds privately, directly to a bank, and there's two ways that we're going to look at this, and I've gone through this with the Open Space Committee over the last year, but now that we want to proceed ahead, I'm going to look at either doing it as a private placement, where we work directly with a bank or a financial institution, and they would generally set it up to where it would be serialized coupons, where on the long end, it potentially could get up into the 5.5, 6, 6.5, but the lower end would be a lot lower than that. And so the combined rate right now, I'm thinking will be somewhere between 4.5% and 5.5% based on current interest rates. If we don't sell it that way, we would sell it through a market transaction where we would go through a competitive bond sale and go through the process of creating an official statement and getting a bond rating. I'd be working with probably one or two of you on the council as well as some county staff to put together a bond rating, at which point we would then select an underwriter through a competitive process. So there's two different ways to sell the bonds. That the document that you have before you allows for either of those. And so once again, we've set that max coupon at 6.5%. We won't know what the actual interest rate is on the bond until we lock in the rate when we sell the bond. But based on current market conditions, we're probably in that 4.5% to 5.5% range. Rates have gone up, as probably everybody in this room knows, over the last year and a half, as the Fed continues to increase the Fed funds rates and trying to battle inflation and other things. So anyway, that's those are the parameters set forth. Once again, the process to issue the bond takes about 60 days. And I believe the resolution calls for a public hearing. I'm not sure off the top of my head exactly what date we've got in there. Brad would know, but I believe that public hearing is set for in the next 3 to 4 weeks, where we would come back and then allow for comment prior to going out and finalizing the bonds. So I'm happy to help answer questions regarding the resolution, questions regarding the bond market, the process to sell the bond, but anyway, I'll turn the time back over to you.
Okay.
Looks like we have a...
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
You said there were two different options. One, you kind of gave us a ballpark range. Are they going to be similar rates regardless of the option that we choose?
Yeah.
What's the difference between the two of them then, as far as pros and cons for the county?
Yeah, well, not sure exactly how much time you want me to spend to answer that, but at the end of the day, I'm going to look at both options, and whatever is the lowest cost to the county is the way we're going to do it. There's pros and cons, and to maybe give a quick answer to your question, the pro of going through a direct placement is it's a little bit quicker of a process, and we can lock something in quicker, so you mitigate interest rate risk because you don't have to put together a preliminary official statement. You don't have to get a bond rating and go through some of the steps necessary to sell the bonds out in the market. So it speeds things up. The downside is, generally speaking, the direct placement's going to carry a little bit higher of an interest rate, and they're going to serialize those bonds, which is why we've set that parameter at 6.5%. So if sometimes if things need to get done really rapidly, folks prefer to go the direct placement route. But if you've got the time available to go through the full process of, again, the bond rating, the preliminary official statement, generally the rate's going to be a little bit lower. However, the costs are going to be a little bit higher because you have the bond rating that costs money. You have the preliminary official statement and so forth. So my job in working for you is to look at both options, find out our best guess as to where the interest rate's going to be, what the costs are going to be, and kind of weigh that all out and then recommend a method of sale of how we want to move ahead. Does that answer your question. Sure.
I have a question.
Sure.
At the risk of disappointing the people who elected me, I don't understand how the bond process works, especially related to this bill that, or the resolution that we passed where we are having taxpayers give us money for this open spaces. So how does that translate into a bond? Can you explain that?
Sure, sure. So what the county decided to do as they were getting ready to go out and proceed with this open space project is they decided that the best way to determine or to decide whether to do this is to ask the voters' permission. And a general obligation bond is the only bond that requires voter authorization. Now, the good news is, if you get the voter authorization, a GO bond generally carries the lowest interest rate of all other bonds because investors know that the county has approval now from their voters that you can levy a tax on their property, whatever necessary to repay the debt. And so that's the most secure security, if you will, or collateral on a bond out there. And so in turn, it's the safest bond for a bondholder to buy, so they're going to give you the lowest interest rate. So what's happened is, because the county went out, asked the voters, provided them what they anticipated the tax impact to be to an average homeowner, and got approval. Now, as a county, you have the ability to issue that $20 million over time. You can do it in one piece. You could do it multiple pieces. In this case, you're going to do it in at least two because you're only issuing $6 million at this time. But once you sell the bond over the next month or two, we lock in an interest rate. We lock in what the annual payment's going to be. And then the county, as they prepare their taxes and budget and so forth, they levy a debt service tax to the property owners, whatever is necessary in order to pay back that debt. And so that's essentially what the bond is, and that's what the voters approved last November when you held that GO bond election.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Another question. I generally think I know the answer to this, but let's say we get worst case scenario, we're at 6% on this that we're going to pay for the bond. And in 2 years from now, because we have this obligation for 20 years, let's say 2 years from now, the interest rates, the economy changes and such, and interest rates go back down, and maybe it's about 2%. Is there any way to restructure that? Because we already sold the bond.
Right.
Is there any way to restructure back down to a more favorable rate with I don't know, for the duration of the remainder of the bond?
Yeah. No, and that's a great question, because interest rates are, again, relatively high compared to where they were. The hope and the perhaps expectation is interest rates will go lower over the next year or two or three. So can you repay it or refinance it? And the question is, that all depends on the prepayment or the call provision on the bonds. And I think we've talked a little bit about this previously with the Open Space Committee. If we go the method of sale where we sell it as a direct purchase, it's likely that depends on kind of a bank's appetite, but some banks will allow a callable anytime feature, meaning if you wanted to pay them off or refinance it next year, you could do that. Some might offer a 3-year call where you have to wait at least 3 years before you can do that, or a 5-year call. If we sell the bond out in the market because we determine that it's your best bet as far as the lowest cost, overall cost is with interest rates and so forth, the likelihood is you're going to sell that bond somewhere between an 8-year call and a 10-year call, meaning you can't refinance it or pay it down for 8 years or 9 years or 10 years. So the answer is yes, you can do that, but it all depends on what the call provision is on the bonds.
Is there extra costs involved? with some of those programs?
When you're selling the bond out in the marketplace and you want to maybe switch it up, and traditionally they want a 10-year call, and you say, you know what, we actually want an 8-year call because we want that extra 2 years of flexibility. Generally, there's a cost to that, and that would only mean a slightly higher interest rate. And so, you know, the more flexibility you want, generally the more it costs you up front. This is Brad right here. I'm just going over your resolution right now. If you have any legal questions, I'm sure Brad would be happy to take the mic. Any other market questions? These are all really good questions, by the way. Carl, do you have a question? I've worked with Carl many times, so I'm putting you on the spot.
You are. No, Alex, I read through the bond indenture and pretty straightforward, pretty standard.
Yeah.
And as you pointed out, risk and rate are directly proportional. And if you put a call provision in, the investor buying the bond has a certain expectation of return. And so if you pay it off sooner or require a call provision, they're going to have a prepayment penalty to be able to do that.
Yep.
Are these bonds, in other words, is ours put together in a package that then is sent to the big market, and then as a package and purchased as amongst maybe 20 others or something?
No.
Or it'll be individually?
Yes, this will be a standalone bond issue. Regardless of the method of sale, we're going to sell Cache County $6 million bond, and it'll be an all or none. We won't be selling off $3 million to somebody and another $3 million to somebody else. We're gonna select one purchaser or one underwriter to buy the whole thing. And anyway, and it's not going to be hard to sell because, like we've talked about, GO bonds generally are viewed as the strongest type of bond, the most secure type of bond because of the authorization you have with the property and property taxes. So we're gonna be able to find plenty of buyers, especially out in the market, because of things that have happened this year. Some of the bank issues that you've read about or heard about, and banks closing their doors and just different things. Banks are a little tighter, I would say, than they once were, even just earlier this year. There aren't a lot of banks out there that now will fix an interest rate for 20 years. The county wants to repay this over a 20-year period, and that's where the market option becomes even better because we're going to definitely get a fixed interest rate. I can only think of a few, and I work with most banks that buy these bonds, you know, locally, regionally, even nationally. There's only a few out there that'll fix an interest rate for 20 years. But we'll talk to them, and we'll make sure that that we're going to get the best option for the county possible.
Any other questions of Alex?
Thank you for coming up.
They can just be
Thank
fun
you.
questions.
I have a quick question. Yeah, I have a quick question for Brad. Do you recall off the top of your head when we have the public hearing set?
I think we already have a public hearing when we had the bond election.
Okay, and so a second public hearing will not be required?
I don't think so.
Okay, okay.
We'll make sure two legals are looking into that, right? Terrific.
I agree with that. I think the public hearing's been held. We've been authorized to bond, and now, so I agree with that based on my understanding. But we'll double check.
Which, just share with us. See, our request currently is at $6 million.
6 million?
It says in the resolution.
Yes.
And so, I'm sure people would probably be wondering, well, boy, we bonded for 20, why aren't you taking all 20 right now? Well, you know, we've had this discussion. Could you just share that rationale with everybody?
Sure. So.
And without details and everything that we, you know.
Yeah.
Too many details, I guess.
Well, sure. I mean, the bottom line is when you borrow money, no matter what the size is, you're going to have to pay interest on that amount. So if there was a $20 million project, or, you know, 12 million, or whatever the case is, you'd borrow for what you need at this time. There's two things. One, you're paying for what you borrow, and so if you don't need 20 million, you only need 6. It doesn't make any sense to borrow the extra 14 million that you're paying interest on. And maybe even more important is, especially right now where you can invest the proceeds of bonds at a higher interest rate generally, or very close to where the interest rate that you're going to be paying is. That's actually called positive arbitrage. It maybe gets a little too in the weeds, but there's some restrictions as far as how much money you can earn while you're just sitting on it. And so if you're earning positive arbitrage, and Brad could speak to this as well, generally the IRS likes you to spend the bond proceeds within a 24-month period. And then even if it's just no arbitrage or a negative arbitrage, you still are recommended to spend within a 3-year period. So we wouldn't want you to borrow more than you need and sit on it and then be in a situation where you don't have the or you run out of time to spend the money. The positive to spend or to issue a bigger bond is the economies of scale. Every time you issue an individual bond, it's going to cost you money for cost of issuance and, you know, the fees associated. So if you had 2 pieces of land to buy, then we'd say, hey, let's up that parameter and let's take advantage of this opportunity. But if you feel like you can only spend the $6 million, then the prudent thing to do right now is only issue the $6 million and then wait till you have another $14 million in need before you issue the second. So that's my thought. I don't know if, Brad, if you have anything you wanted to add to that.
No, Alex, you're absolutely right. One of the things we are concerned about is the arbitrage. If you fall within certain expenditures, you don't need to pay that back to the United States government. So if we're going to spend these bond proceeds within 24 months, as Alex suggested, then there's no need to repay that arbitrage. And so we won't worry about it then. But if you do take longer than 24 months to explain, you have to repay that arbitrage that you earned to the government. There's also a couple of other exceptions.
Brad, why don't you come on up? You made the drive up, so I'm going to let you at least get the mic for a minute or two, and they can hear you better too.
Yeah, and the other thing too, and I apologize for, I don't know if I'm really late. I thought I was going to be here around 7, and I left a little bit early so I could be here at 6:30. So.
I thought I said 6:30.
Oh, my bad.
We were just running.
My bad. So.
We're just so efficient.
So, well, thank you. My name's Brad Patterson. I'm with the law firm of Gilmore Bell. We are bond counsel to the county. I've been doing a little bit of family history lately, and I found out something really interesting, that I have somewhat of a strong connection to the county. My great-great-grandfather was the first county treasurer here in Cache County, Joel Ricks. I don't know if you've ever heard that name before, but anyway, Rick Springs, and that's family. So anyway, it feels really good to be back home. So. As Alex mentioned, one of the things we worry about are some of the provisions that are in the federal income tax code. The federal government likes to give governmental entities some benefits here and there. One is that they allow them to borrow at lower cost because the interest on the bonds are tax exempt. And if the interest on the bonds is tax exempt, then consequently you have a lower interest rate because your investors don't have to pay that to the federal government. So they give you a lower interest rate. But as with all things with the federal government, it comes with strings. They expect you to undertake certain kinds of covenants. One is the expenditure of bond proceeds. You have to spend them within three years. And otherwise the interest on the bonds will be taxable, and that's what we do not want. And so we like to structure the deal, and we like to make sure that there's covenants in place, record keeping in place, so that the bond proceeds are spent within 3 years. But as Alex mentioned, we, also have we can earn rebate right now, which is great news. But as Alex mentioned, there's certain kinds of restrictions there as well. And so we'll help you walk through that as we go forward. It's a lot into the weeds. I really don't like to go there myself too terribly often because there's snakes in weeds. And so we may want to, if anybody has any questions about it, you're more than welcome to ask about it.
So I have a question. Sure. So if we bond for that $6 million and then this deal that we're thinking about doesn't go through, we're kind of under the gun for 2 or 3 years to spend it, or can we just give it back? Is there a penalty? How does that work?
There are some things that you can do for that. Options are pretty ugly. At the end of the day, they end up costing more money at the end of the day. There's ways we can do it, but sometimes it's really cost prohibitive to do it that way. So.
Let's say we don't end up pursuing what we think we're going to be doing. At any point in this, where's the point of no return in this process? Like, is that right now? Or is that when you have to go actually sell that on the market, right? Before we're at the point of no return?
Yeah, so the point of no return is basically when we lock in the interest rate, which is either, if it's through a bank where we accept the interest rate that a bank is offering and they lock funds in. Now, some banks might be willing to, if then we decided, hey, you know what, never mind. Certain banks I can think of might say, okay, deal's off. Other banks would say, oh, we've locked in our funds, then there's a breakage fee, and we've lost X amount, our cost of funds is this, we set it aside, you owe us something to break it. That's a little bit easier to unwind than if we were to sell the bond out in the marketplace, and we actually held a competitive bond sale like we talked about, where we take the lowest bid on a given day that we've determined and underwriters bid on the bonds, and we, they work with their investors and they provide us rates, and then we say, good, we'll take it. That's when we lock it in. And then there's usually about a 2-week period that Brad and his team put together all the closing documents, and we finalize everything, and then we have a closing. So I would say best case scenario, if we go through the market method, we have about 5 or 6 weeks until we would have that sale. So you have about that much time to make sure you want to move ahead with this bond. On a direct placement, probably take me 3 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks to lock something in with a bank. So I'd say put in your head, we have about a month to decide if we can buy this property, and because then if not, then we call off the dogs. Now, the good news is we would still have $6 million authorized to where if you found another property, you could act on it, because we've now already adopted this parameters resolution. Now, I will say this, if you think there could be a possibility that within the next little while, this property could go away and another property could come up, and it might be 10 million or 12 million or 15 million or 20 million, there's nothing that would prohibit you today to adopt a parameters at 20 million. At 20 million, he'd have to, cross out a few things and adjust them, and correct me if I'm wrong, but then you'd have ultimate flexibility. And then if you only want to issue 6 million with this other property, it's all you issue. Setting a parameter at 20 million absolutely does not mean you're going to sell a bond for 20 million. So I would only just throw that out there. Maybe that's, pie in the sky, but initially we thought, well, they ought to just do the parameter at 20 million so they'd have ultimate flexibility if there's another property. So that only came to mind because the thought was, well, what if this property goes away? If you've issued a $20 million authorization, then you have ultimate flexibility to find another property. So. I don't know if you want to add anything
If I
to
could
that.
just add something, if you wanted to come back and always increase the parameter, you could always do that. We'd take another resolution and have, take another meeting of the county, of the county commission in order to do that. And so that's really not a problem. What this just allows us to do, the parameter resolution allows us some flexibility in going out and marketing and pricing the bonds without having to come back to the council for approval, without having to come back to the commission for approval. So that's one of the things I wanted to point out too, that one of the things this resolution does is it designates certain individuals the authority to go out and establish the final terms of the bonds with no need to come back to the council or commission, as long as those rates and terms are within the amount set forth in the parameters resolution.
Thanks.
Really appreciate this.
So today, do we actually adopt anything? Because it doesn't have.
It's initial, you could waive the rules and,
The resolution.
you know, and pass that and get this underway, or whatever we need to do. I'll entertain motions, or
Well, I will waive the rules and make a motion to approve Resolution 2023-19, consideration of the resolution authorizing the issuance and sale of by the county of not more than $6 million aggregate principal amount of bonds.
I'll second it.
it's been moved and seconded that we waive the rules and pass resolution 2023-19 in the consideration of the resolution authorizing the issuance and sale of the bond of the county for not more than, by the county of not more than $6 million aggregate principal amount. Is there any discussion?
Do we want to do the 20 million? Doesn't obligate us to do anything other than we just don't have to.
I know, but don't you have to pay it back if you don't spend it within 3
No,
years?
we don't sell the bonds.
Oh.
We're just doing the preliminary work as a council. It's already been approved by the voters.
And if only 6 million of it right now is needed,
Yeah.
we can,
Then you only issue the 6 million. Again, the parameter is only setting the maximum amount you could go and not have to come back with another resolution. Like Brad said, we can go through that again, but by doing the 20 million, you allow yourself ultimate flexibility. You're only going to issue a bond size that you want to issue. The 20 million doesn't mean that that's a $20 million bond. It's just the max parameter. You want to add something?
One of the things that would concern me about increasing that to 20 million this evening is we already noticed it up in the resolution, or excuse me, on the agenda for up to $6 million. So we'd have to come back and most likely adopt another resolution.
It won't save us any time.
No.
Okay. Sorry, false alarm. I thought Brad could just make a little, cross it out, but
Yeah, those dang, open and public meeting laws, they get in the way all the time, so.
guess we're stuck with the 6.
okay. Any more discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed?
I abstain, I have to.
Okay. Motion passes. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for coming out.
I do have some chocolate covered nuts.
Yeah, I've heard, oh, yeah.
In the audience here, they are entitled to some as well. So I'll just go ahead and start
You
here.
know, like
and pass
empty
it
as, empty as bag.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Okay. With that, now let's go ahead. Quick council member reports, and then we'll go to executive session. So, Mark, we'd like to hear one from you.
Well, I've got
My
a brief
polls.
report on the library board. They met, I was not able to attend, but I did talk to a couple members. They have continued to review the building drawings, plans for the old elementary school in River Heights that's being considered as potential future physical location for the library. The board discussed, is this really the direction we want to go? And there will be a proposal coming from the library board to we, the council, on whether or not, we want to, where we stand as a council and maybe the board's recommendation, but that's still not ready to be presented due to more evaluation and review needed for the physical soundness or readiness of that building. Basically, is it earthquake proof, et cetera, or what's going to be needed to make it usable, so.
What is
lots
it
more
right now?
discussion. What's that?
What is it right now, currently being used for, the building?
So right now, it's, well, River Heights City is using it for their Public Works office. And I think maybe they may or may not be renting out the gym for, use as a recreational place or something, but for the most part, and the school district did keep some offices for like, speech development, and I can't remember the entity, but the school district did keep a couple offices. But mainly the building is unused, and they're considering locating the building, or the building that's housing the library currently is in Providence, and they're considering moving it there to River Heights, because it's a bigger, better offering is the pitch. Still unclear, and like we've talked about a little bit, is what do we want for brick and mortar, and what do we want the Cache County Library to be? So the board's gonna come up with a suggestion, maybe a couple proposals, and then bring that to this body, but we're not there yet. And that's all I have for reports, but just publicly, I want to thank everybody for filling in for me on the Board of Equalization in my absence. I very much appreciate your flexibility and accommodation, and I will find a good way to make that up to everybody. Thank you.
Glad you're here.
Yeah, 28 days straight next year.
If that's what it
You
takes,
got 'em all.
I'll do it. Definitely will do it.
That'll be excitement.
I don't have anything
Anything,
tonight.
Carl?
Nothing, no.
Nothing for me.
Thank you.
Nothing.
Nothing here. Let's go ahead and I'll entertain a motion to go into executive session for the strategy session to discuss the purchase, exchange, or lease of real property.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Dana, are we upstairs?